Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com. For pricing, that is Team Mosso at the1916company.com. Today, we are discussing a watch that was launched in 2004, part of the 2002 to 2021 Breitling for Bentley collection. This is the Breitling Bentley 6.75, named after the nearly 7-liter V8 built at Crewe for Bentleys and Rolls-Royces, and it started out as a 6.2 in the late 50s before rolling over to the 6.75 liter size in the late 60s and early 70s, and it's best known as the 6.75. At the same time, the Rolls-Royce Bentley V8 was growing. Breitling itself was launching a series of watches known as the Big Navitimers, and so what you see right here is actually built on a platform based on those Big Navitimers right up to the differential-equipped circular slide rule calculator bezel. So there's actually more history here than just the connection between Breitling and Bentley. This design goes way back. Now, what doesn't go way back is the custom elements. We have a Breitling for Bentley speed bracelet, a knurled bezel, a brown bronze dial, and a big date. We're going to talk about all of those late-breaking modern features. But first, the size. The Big Navitimers were always big, 48.7 millimeters in diameter and steel, 17.5 millimeters thick, and 54.8 millimeters lug-to-lug with a 24 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw this on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it is too large for me. Just as a Bentley would probably be too large for me, this is going to overhang the edge of my wrist to the point where I feel like it's just a bit awkward. So I would say you want a wrist of 17 centimeters circumference or larger to wear this well. My wrist is 16. It is thick. It's probably not going to slide under a cuff, but keep in mind you don't wear a Breitling for Bentley to hide it, just like you don't drive a Bentley to hide away and disappear. So the bracelet does look like it might be the Breitling Pilot bracelet, but it actually has thicker shoulder links and narrower center links, and this is the relatively short-lived speed bracelet that was created specifically for the Breitling Bentley collection, and it tapers down towards the clasp. You can see here we have some removable links that are fixed in place using screws, and then we have a single fold deployant of thick gauge steel. We have a clasp with three, well, I suppose you could say 3 chronically unoccupied positions. So you can occupy any one of them at a given time using your strap tool and change the anchoring point of the bracelet. So you've got some flexibility separate from removing and adding links. Now there is a clasp here. There were 2 versions of the speed bracelet, the one that had a standard Breitling clasp and then one that actually said Bentley on it. So this is definitely the speed bracelet, but it's got the Breitling style clasp with a clamshell lock. And you can see, thinking ahead, Breitling understands that these clamshells can wear down over time, so instead of pressing it permanently, they fix it with a screw so it can be removed and replaced if its tolerances ever become anything less than snappy. Now, a little fact about Breitling bracelets, you can find that there's a little code on the inside. There's also a code between the lugs, though it's harder to see with the bracelet on the watch. But you see how it says 4404? That means the bracelet was made in the 44th week of 2004, so it usually corresponds pretty closely to the manufacturer of the watch, so it's an easy way to date a Breitling when you encounter one. There's a lot of polish here. That was characteristic of the Breitling for Bentley pieces, but generally also of the Schneider family era Breitlings of the 2000s and 2010s. But the case shape is very much that of the Big Navitimers of the 60s and 70s. Highly angular, bold, imposing, but functionally large because of this unique differential-driven calculator bezel. We have here a screw-down crown. The watch is 100 meters water resistant, so though this is a land sports, motorsports-oriented chronograph, it does have swimmable water resistance. We'll do a quick loom shot here. Note the minute hand and the hour hand are just about superimposed. You can actually see some of the chronograph registers, and it's fairly practical in that regard. There's a multiplicity of luminescent elements as well as applied indices, so these are not printed features. Applique indices are more upscale. We have a brown sunburst, brown bronze metallic sunburst at center, applied Breitling wing style logo. You can see sunken subregisters with polished chapter rings. And then we've got this slide rule bezel. And one thing you should note, if you're familiar with the traditional Navitimers, is the best way I could describe this is that it works backwards. So all sorts of funky things with these bezels. But what I want to demonstrate here is that the bezel, the outer bezel, the knurled bezel with the Breitling style knurling, is moving at a different speed than the numeric scale. It's not obvious at first, but when you look, you can actually see that the scale is accelerating slowly ahead of the outer bezel. That's what this is. It's a cover to a differential. Many people mistake this for some sort of helium escape valve. That's definitely not what it is. So keep in mind that this works just a little bit differently. And when I say it works a little bit differently, I mean normally when you're using the Navitimer bezel, if you want to divide something, you set it up like a fraction where you put the thing to be divided over the thing that's dividing. So if I would be dividing 8 by 3 on a standard Navitimer, and then I'd go over to the index to see what the number was. And in fact, here you can see that it's 24, so it's multiplying 8 by 3. And it works the same way in reverse. Whereas, in the past, if you were to put 4 over the index, which is this little red arrow on the inside, you would then find out, you just go to whatever number you want, like 3, for example, to see what 4 times 3 is. So it's a very strange system that's calibrated for motorsports, not for flying, which is why you see things like minutes and seconds and hours as though we're in some sort of 24-hour race like Spa or Le Mans. There's a lot of depth to this dial, and then you can see we've got a chronograph. This is a standard chronograph with a chronograph seconds hand that makes one sweep every 60 seconds. Some versions of these watches have 30-second chronographs. This is the standard 60. Now when I screw the crown out, we've got a couple of setting modes. One is hacking or stop seconds if you want to synchronize to a reference time. And then you can see I've got a quick set for that double-digit date. And I don't know how well you can see this, but the numerals are sort of reddish brown. That's how I describe them. It is a modular chronograph. As you can see, the chronograph pushers are slightly above the center line of the crown, and it's a vertical clutch mechanism. So you can see when I start the chrono, there's no jump or stagger or extraneous motion. That is the consequence of the chronograph module being a seamless vertical clutch mechanism. The base caliber is an ETA 2892A2. You can see on the reverse side, we have a modern forged alloy multi-piece Bentley performance wheel with a Bentley B at center, several different types of finishing, and a lot of three-dimensional qualities. But the 2892A2 is automatic winding with bidirectional action, a 42-hour power reserve, a 4 Hz beat rate, 5-position adjustment, and a COSC Swiss chronometer certification. So it's an accurate and tough timekeeper that acts as a reliable tractor caliber for the chrono. And when you combine these two things, the module with the base, Breitling calls this caliber 44B, and it has 38 joules. If you love this watch, reach out Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.